Mainstream military channels are currently selling you a dangerous geometric fantasy regarding the imminent conflict. They confidently claim that 5,000 U.S. Marines dropping from V-22 Ospreys will simply bypass Iranian defenses. Any seasoned combat veteran knows that plans drawn on a pristine whiteboard never survive contact with a cheap FPV drone swarm. We are decoding the brutal and extremely asymmetric reality of a massive amphibious invasion across the Strait of Hormuz. This involves analyzing the terrible logistics and the vast tunnel networks that paper strategists are absolutely terrified to discuss. The mainstream narratives completely ignore the sheer complexity of occupying a highly contested and extremely fortified island. For over 30 days, the United States Navy has been intensely hammering 21 nautical miles of the surrounding ocean water. Thousands of sorties have been flown, and 13,000 military targets were reportedly destroyed during this massive campaign. Despite deploying 80 warships and launching hundreds of Tomahawk cruise missiles, the highly contested strait remains entirely closed. American commanders eventually realized that relying exclusively on naval firepower would never secure this critical global choke point. The overarching strategy had to shift dramatically because dropping explosives from the sky does not equate to holding physical ground. That is exactly why thousands of highly trained Marines arrived on the USS Tripoli and the USS Boxer to alter the entire battle equation. The fundamental question is not whether these Marines will invade, but rather how they plan to survive the ultimate asymmetric kill web. Welcome to the harsh reality where 150,000 troops on paper become a terrifying disadvantage right on the bloody beach. Let us take a brutally honest look at the absolute geographical nightmare that dictates this conflict. The physical battleground is an incredibly narrow stretch, consisting of 21 nautical miles of highly contested water. We will not waste your precious time aggressively reading standard Wikipedia specifications about the American F-35 stealth fighters. Every single combat veteran already understands exactly what the legendary A-10 Warthog does when it arrives in a hostile airspace. These incredibly advanced war machines represent the absolute pinnacle of modern aviation technology within the global military landscape. However, all the overwhelming aerial supremacy and naval artillery in the world cannot inherently force this critical strait to open. The United States Navy undeniably possesses the most terrifying accumulation of destructive firepower ever assembled in human history. The core problem relies on the fundamental fact that the opposing forces simply refuse to fight the war that American admirals want. Instead of meeting destroyers on the open ocean surface, they have masterfully engineered a defensive trap that negates our strengths. The brutal equation remains simple, because thousands of high-explosive bombs and precision missiles only create massive smoking craters. They absolutely do not physically occupy the strategic territory necessary to ensure the safe passage of international commercial ships. Before discussing the specific marine operations, we need to analyze how the defensive foundation was built directly beneath the surface. To understand why ground forces became an absolute necessity, we must completely dissect the invisible layers of this deadly environment. The foundation of this incredible defense mechanism lies deep beneath the ocean surface and across several highly fortified islands. Before the MEU can even insert, naval aviation must thoroughly degrade Iran's A2AD envelope covering the entire southern coastline. The powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps effectively turned the strategic fortress islands into fixed, unsinkable aircraft carriers. These scattered geographical formations are densely packed with early warning radar stations and massive anti-ship cruise missile arrays. Defense intelligence agencies estimated they possessed more than 5,000 passive naval mines before the conflict officially began. These cheap and totally invisible explosive devices were laid quickly from speedboats and submarines long before the first day of combat. They sit quietly on the dark seabed and patiently wait for any American escort destroyer to enter their incredibly lethal blast radius. The primary killing zone is dictated by geography because the mainland boasts 1,000 miles of incredibly mountainous southern terrain. This rugged environment hides thousands of deadly mobile missile launchers strategically buried inside incredibly hardened tunnel networks. These elusive weapons drive out from multiple hidden exits, fire their heavy payloads, and retreat right back into the solid mountain. Satellites can map the mountain caves, but they cannot reliably predict which opening will be used to launch the heavy cruise missiles. The conventional amphibious assault architecture is completely rewritten when the Marine Expeditionary Unit arrives from the sky. The MV-22B Osprey tiltrotor machine fundamentally changes the mathematical equation because it flies twice as fast as a helicopter. Cruising comfortably at 270 knots, this advanced aircraft operates high above the traditional defensive layers. Transiting at an impressive 15,000 feet, physically places the aircraft far beyond the effective reach of standard manpads. The ubiquitous Igla-S shoulder-fired missile simply cannot intercept a target cruising at that incredible altitude and high velocity. However, all these incredible theoretical advantages instantly evaporate during the terrifying final descent into the contested zone. Bypassing the vast coastal missile batteries means absolutely nothing if the designated landing zone remains thoroughly compromised. The highly touted Ospreys offer incredible range, but their extreme vulnerability during the final approach phase cannot be overstated. Those crucial final 90 seconds become a terrifying gamble against hidden manpads scattered around the isolated island perimeters. Landing successfully is only a temporary optical victory before the gruesome reality of sustaining that isolated position truly sets in. Welcome to the grueling reality of Day 2 operations, where the initial shock and awe transitions into the attrition sandbox. We must thoroughly understand the harsh truth that defeating the entrenched adversary is absolutely not a simple firepower problem. The mainstream strategic analysts incorrectly assume that overwhelming aerial bombardment will permanently neutralize the threat. In this deeply complex operational theater, overcoming the embedded military resistance is fundamentally a severe logistics problem. Seizing the heavily contested island might appear visually victorious, but securing the perimeter is merely the opening nightmare. The brilliant defending commanders understand that they do not need to win a massive conventional battle to paralyze the invasion. Their brutal asymmetric strategy relies entirely on bleeding the expeditionary forces dry through relentless decentralized attacks. To a deeply embedded resistance cell operating securely in the shadows, a newly established static marine base is not a stronghold. Instead of viewing the American encampment as an impenetrable fortress, the cunning enemy simply sees a target-rich environment. Holding these isolated and highly vulnerable geographical formations requires an impossible continuous flow of essential supplies. The defending military forces absolutely do not need to win a massive direct firefight to achieve their ultimate strategic objectives. Instead of engaging in conventional warfare, they utilize highly decentralized attack teams to systematically dismantle the opposition. These highly trained operators rely heavily on concealed manpads and autonomous loitering munitions to relentlessly harass the invaders. This terrifying tactical approach is specifically designed to bleed the fragile American resupply lines dry over an extended period. Even the most elite Marine Expeditionary Units cannot survive indefinitely under a constant and unforgiving rain of precision drone strikes. Furthermore, we must also carefully calculate the ultimate asymmetric wildcard, which involves devastating radiological area denial tactics. Using raw yellowcake to intentionally salt a designated landing zone effectively ends the amphibious assault before boots even hit the sand. This horrific contamination strategy creates an impenetrable barrier that totally neutralizes our overwhelming technological superiority. Surviving these initial aerial insertions merely exposes the vulnerable ground troops to a completely different type of psychological hell. Traditional counterinsurgency methods become completely obsolete when the defending forces utilize such extreme and unconventional measures. Every single inch of the contested territory transforms into a highly lethal trap specifically engineered to maximize American casualties. The fundamental reality of this decentralized asymmetric warfare proves that maintaining a physical presence demands an unimaginable toll. Clearing hardened mountain facilities and complex underground tunnel networks presents an absolute nightmare for advancing troops. The tactical priority immediately shifts towards force preservation within this highly saturated and immensely hostile combat theater. Ground units must meticulously sweep every dark passage while constantly facing the extreme threat of heavily armed enemy ambushes. American commanders deploy a specialized arsenal of highly advanced technological countermeasures to systematically neutralize these threats. Directed microwave weapons are specifically utilized to instantly disable the incoming swarms of highly explosive loitering munitions. Unmanned autonomous submarine vehicles methodically scan the treacherous coastal waters to safely detonate hidden explosive naval mines. Advanced counter-battery radar systems continuously monitor the battlefield to rapidly identify and destroy active hostile artillery nodes. Every specific piece of equipment represents a desperate calculation to keep expeditionary forces alive against a highly determined enemy. Let us delve deep into the absolute logistical hell required to resupply an isolated garrison surrounded by highly contested ocean waters. The mainstream narrative confidently presents a highly comforting mathematical equation regarding the initial amphibious assault phase. They eagerly claim that landing 550 elite Marines against 300 embedded defenders guarantees absolute victory. However, this incredibly simplistic geometry completely ignores the terrifying reality that numerical superiority requires constant supply. Those highly concentrated infantry battalions demand thousands of gallons of clean water, medical provisions, and heavy ammunition daily. Delivering these absolutely vital provisions turns every single heavy transport helicopter into an incredibly lucrative and slow target. A continuous and unforgiving rain of explosive loitering munitions ensures that maintaining the vital supply lines becomes a bloodbath. The deeply entrenched enemy intentionally designed this brutal scenario to transform our extensive logistical tail into a fatal liability. Securing a barren rock in the ocean means absolutely nothing if the brave troops stationed there slowly run out of necessary ammunition. Let us deeply analyze the devastating global economic ramifications and the brutal commercial realities of this geopolitical nightmare. The mainstream media fails to understand that this vital maritime corridor is not physically blocked by massive sunken cargo vessels. Instead of a physical barricade, the heavily contested strait is practically closed due to the staggering international insurance risks. Multinational shipping corporations simply refuse to send their billion-dollar supertankers through a highly active military kill zone. The incredibly cunning Iranian military commanders have effectively established a terrifying geopolitical toll booth across the waters. Global maritime insurance syndicates calculate their massive premiums based on the undeniable probability of catastrophic hull damage. The highly publicized deployment of thousands of heavily armed Marines does absolutely nothing to automatically lower these financial costs. Commercial vessels will strictly resume normal operations when the terrifying autonomous drone threat is entirely neutralized at the source. Merely occupying the perimeter islands without eliminating the mobile launchers guarantees that the global energy supply remains paralyzed. The brutal truth is that taking the fortified islands in the Strait of Hormuz might actually be the surprisingly easy part of this war. Physically occupying a barren rock under a constant and unforgiving rain of explosive loitering munitions constitutes the real nightmare. The incredibly complex mathematics of this unprecedented geopolitical conflict eventually left American military commanders no alternative. A defensive system built exclusively for naval ships was systematically dismantled from above, but the occupation phase demands a choice. The fourth quarter of this massive campaign effectively opens the strategic strait, not because a high-ranking general gave a simple order. It opens simply because the ruthless combat mathematics and the staggering destruction of the enemy weapons factories left no other option. However, maintaining that fragile control requires an immense sacrifice from the brave ground units deployed into the attrition sandbox. The entire global economy remains held hostage by the continuous threat of decentralized asymmetric warfare hiding within mountain caves. Supertankers remain completely paralyzed at sea, waiting for absolute certainty before transporting a fifth of the energy supply worldwide. So, I officially pass the strategic command to you, asking how you would handle this terrifying situation if you were the MEU commander. Would you authorize the dangerous V-22 Osprey insertion despite the extreme manpad threats hiding within the heavily fortified mountains? Or would you rather rely entirely on an extended naval and air blockade to slowly starve the entrenched defenders over several long months? Let me know your specific tactical doctrine in the comments section below, and I will pin the most realistic operational plan for everyone.